Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. I love it when people come up to me and recommend guests. Not only does it make me feel like my listeners are invested in this podcast, but then I get to meet new people, like my next guest. We are literally meeting for the first time thanks to a mutual friend of ours. If there's one thing I know is when Justin Anderson recommends a guest, you know they're going to be interesting. Justin has actually been campaigning to have Cole Jackson here on this show for quite some time. And as is usually the case, my schedule was the only hurdle. So now that that's out of the way, we're here. I'm excited. I'm intrigued, especially sitting down here with Cole in his workshop in Manville, Alberta, to get some insight as Justin has as to why my guest Cole Jackson is completely interesting. And just setting up here, I think there's a lot of facets here. So thanks so much for inviting me into your workshop. It's impressive.
Thank you.
I don't even know where to start. There's so much going on in my mind here.
Well, what I have here is I have a shop that's probably about a third of the size for my hobbies and my interests, and also the junk that I seem to collect and want to put on the wall or put in display and utilize. So it's a cluttered space, but I quite enjoy it.
Okay, let's start where the table we're sitting at. I'm looking at an array of pipes.
Yes. So yeah, my older brother, for a Christmas present a little while ago, bought me from an estate sale a whole bunch of pipes. And so, I had them upstairs in my office here in my shop for a little while, and then I kind of let them migrate down. And I guess the problem with the pipes coming down to where I'm usually working at is I have a tendency to want to use them more from time to time. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but yeah.
I mean, what's this one here? This is the one that's like a Sherlock Holmes type of...
I liken it to the movie Inglourious Bastards and Christopher Waltz's character, and he's sitting down with the French family, the French dairy farmers, and he asks if he can smoke, and he whips out of his coat this massive pipe. I've got another one up there that's even bigger, actually. And he sits there and he lights it up in like a really, I don't know, it's like pretentious fashion, and I don't know. I quite think it's funny. I don't know the name of them, but it's some type of a German name, and they have some kind of a clay band on them or whatever there. And yeah.
It's cool. You just don't see pipes nowadays.
Right? No, especially in our age group.
Yeah,
this is not
absolutely.
not a normal thing. Maybe I let pride myself a little bit on not being normal or challenging those conventional ideas a little bit, but yeah.
And then staring right at me from across is an array of refreshments, I guess we could say.
Well, I got a little something for everyone, or I like to try to have a little something for everyone.
Yeah.
And people would walk in here and assume that likely I would have a problem based on what they're seeing there, and it's more of a hospitality thing. I just like to please people, perhaps.
Well, we'll maybe snap some pictures so that people get an idea of the space we're sitting in. But I think what you had said when we were, I guess, texting back and forth was let's do it in my shop, because that's my the inspiration zone, I guess we could say. But so you mentioned something interesting that you found when you were a kid. You videotaped yourself. And
yes.
Let's go with that, because this actually that intrigued me here.
Okay, well, it's sort of an odd thing, and this was before the age of podcasts or videotaping yourself. And we used to have this old camcorder with the big old tapes in it. And for whatever reason, I would set it up in my bedroom, which was somewhat laid out very much like what my shop is. It, tore apart record players and this and that, and this desire to always figure out how things worked.
Right.
And my mom she would just get so mad at me. I burned holes in the carpet with my soldering irons. Anyway, and so I'd videotape myself doing all of these things and talking to myself. And actually, one of the strange things that was on the tapes when I found them was I was giving myself this tutorial on how I wanted my funeral to be. So here I'm like 12 years old, and I'm talking about the music that I want played at my funeral. Just really bizarre things. Right?
It sounds like you were ahead of your time in some respect.
I don't know about that. Maybe I identify with another time in history entirely. I often say that to people. They're like, "Oh, what are you working on in your shop?" "Oh, I'm building my time machine. I'm like 3 parts away." And most people's response is, "Oh, where are we going? Can I come with you?" Everyone has this desire to travel throughout time, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's almost like you bring a little bit of around you here. Like, just looking at some of the tools don't seem all that new in some respect, too.
No, actually, and I have a pretty vast collection of a lot of really old tools. They're not all in here. One of my hobbies is restoring old machines like lathes, milling machines, and that type of thing. Over in the corner there, I have a shaper, which is kind of like a milling machine before milling machines, and that one kind of 1910-ish. I've got a couple of 1890s shapers upstairs in my office. I have a lathe from 1890, an old Barnes lathe, a couple of old drill presses, and
so again, is that something you always had an interest in with the antique side of things, or did that come about?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, the old equipment, I'm not a tractor guy, I'm not a truck guy, but like the whole old machinery, the way they used to manufacture things. I'm not a machinist, I'm a welder and a millwright by trade, but I do a lot of machining work here in my shop, and the restoring of old equipment. I hate the idea of how these items all end up in the scrappers and their significant value. And, you think about all the time that was spent at that machine by, numerous people over history, and, what that machine created. Machines make machines that make more machines that ultimately are designed to make our lives easier in some fashion or another. And the whole history concept behind that is, it hurts my soul to see someone just throw it out.
Now, these machines that you're restoring, do you use them?
In some cases, yes. Yeah. In some cases, when we're free and away from the microphones, I'll walk you around and I'll show you a couple of them. But awesome. I do. Yeah.
Now, the way we know each other is through a mutual friend, as I mentioned, Justin Anderson, and I'm sure at one point or another we'll get him on this podcast as well. But you guys know each other through the Cornerstone Co-op board of directors. That was an interesting thing you had mentioned because do you mind if I ask how old you are right now?
I'm 38 years old.
You're 38, so you're actually not that old. You're younger than me. You're on this board, and this is not synonymous with young people. And you've been on this board for a long time.
13 years, 14 years, I think now.
What got you involved with something? That's not something a young adult looks at as, hey, this is something I should be doing.
Yeah. Well, it was pretty easy and organic. My father was on the board before myself.
Okay.
So at the time it wasn't Cornerstone Co-op, it was East Delta Co-op, and we've gone through an amalgamation a number of years ago to form, a larger organization that created some strength for ourselves. But at the time it was East Delta Co-op, which was more the Vermilion, Dewberry, Manville, Wainwright area. And my father was on before, and he was there for 25 years. And actually his great uncle before him was on it back in the 1920s. He wanted to get off, and kind of back then the gentleman's agreement was you almost needed to find your own successor. Right. Well, that was an easy conversation around the dinner table. It's like, I think you should do this. Right. And away I went. And, so I was elected, and very much out of place at first. In my 20s, young kid. I had a young family at the time. My wife and I had children very young. Right. And here I am surrounded by 8 other people on a board of 9. And in my 20s, I think the next youngest guy to me at the time was like 57 kind of thing. And it was a steep learning curve to be, at the time the East Delta annual sales would have been in that $90 million. And, here you are in a boardroom as a 20-some-year-old person with this learning curve on how to provide strategic direction to an individual as your CEO or as your general manager on running this organization. And it was interesting.
Well, you had a saying there that you said is synonymous with these types of boards.
Pale or now I'm gapping. I'm gapping on it. Old, pale, and stale. Right. And so I would imagine a lot of leadership fashions or within governance or all that fun stuff. You end up with the same type of person there. You end up with older gentlemen typically, and the saying is old, pale, and stale.
Right. Did you, being on a board like that, did you draw any other variety of the type of people that the board would normally see?
I don't know if not for the first decade or so of me being there. It was there was a pretty established group, so I didn't there wasn't a lot of people that were drawn in through myself. There has been now, I guess, in recent years where I've helped been a little bit more involved with recruitment, and our group at Cornerstone now is much more diverse. Right. We have 3 lovely ladies on there, which I appreciate immensely. We've got even people now younger than myself. Right. Which is great. Yeah.
Do you think that started with somebody looking at, hey, well, if this guy's on there,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty intimidating thing to walk into a boardroom setting for a young person. It's terrifying. I've been there. It's absolutely terrifying to see, you've got several hundred years of business experience sitting there. And, as a young person walking in and, we're all a sum of our own experiences.
Right.
And you feel a little inadequate perhaps with that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now our group, I think that anyone could walk into our group and feel absolutely at home with the diversity that we have there and the different backgrounds. At one time, a lot of these locally owned co-ops were farmers.
Absolutely.
That's what these co-ops were created for. They created them themselves to fulfill their own needs. And so it was natural that they were farmers. Now the needs of the member owners are vastly different. Yeah. And so, through attrition, you end up with people of different backgrounds and different working environments or whatever. Yeah, for sure.
So what are some of the changes you've seen, I guess, over the years that would kind of stand out as, this wouldn't have happened if we didn't have these other people coming on board?
Oh, that's a really good question. Elevating the level of governance. We've now have a couple of people that have come onto the board, and rather than talking about silly things that boards shouldn't be talking about cracks in sidewalks and windows needing to be washed, we've elevated that level of governance and that level of vision to say, what are we today? What are we in 5 years? What are we in 10 years? What does this look like? How do we create sustainability through it? How do we create these programs? How do we attract the management and the senior leaders that we need to get us to tomorrow? In the world of commerce right now, it's hard. Yeah. It's a tough world. You're competing with multinationals, you're competing with these big box stores, and our goal and our vision is to provide the best value that we can for our members and our communities. Right. And that's the number one goal. And I don't think that there's any other organizations within rural Western Canada that give as much back to communities. That's the number one game of co-op. Right. We're not here lining the pockets of shareholders. Our shareholders are the people that are coming to us looking to buy something, looking to fulfill a need, right? Yeah. Wow. Sorry, I went on a rant.
No, it was one of the things Justin says, you want to get them talking, just start talking about like the co-op board and those kind of things and the history of that. And it's fascinating because you hear about it all the time. Yeah. I mean, being in St. Paul and growing up in Elk Point, that was the only grocery store we had, right?
Well, and like Manville and like Dewberry and like some of the other small communities. It's funny, the last time that I was in front of a microphone like this, I was 13 years old. I was in St. Paul, and I was in Boy Scouts back in the day. Right. And one of my badges, I can't remember what the badge was called, but I had to go and do this work experience thing. Well, I ended up doing it at 1310, and I don't remember the name of the DJ, but it was on the morning show, and he had me come in. I was there for like 3 hours with him. Wow. And I remember we only talked about co-op. So my dad was on the co-op board at the time, and I'm just giving all these plugs to co-op on the air. And that was the last time I sat in front of a microphone.
My last 2 years in radio was at that very station, and co-op was a big supporter of it with advertising and everything. So yeah, I can imagine that you were probably just complying with their ads.
Oh, and, nervous kid, and he's like you. He's getting conversation. He's just getting conversation going, right?
I feel if I think back far enough, was that Danny White maybe?
Yes, it was Danny White.
Okay. Former town councillor. He's gone
on really?
Yeah, he's still around, gone on to has some businesses in town. And
interesting.
Absolutely. Well, we'll probably put him on at some point too. Well, he was the manager when I worked there too. So I actually got to work alongside of him. But digress a little bit there. But aside from co-op now, you've talked about here this shop, I guess, facilitates several hobbies. Like, what are some of the other hobbies? You talked about restoring old machines and tools.
I have entirely too many hobbies. I don't know whether that's a common problem with people, but finding the time and the space for all of them. So right now I have a couple of motorbikes in here, or motorcycles in here. One of them is my dual sport bike that I spend a lot of time beating up gravel roads on. I got another bike in here that I'm actually about to start building a sidecar on. I'm going to be making a whiskey barrel sidecar on that. The DOTs are going to absolutely love me as I'm rolling around in that. I might throw the dog into the sidecar. So I do a lot of motorcycle small engine type stuff. I try not to do a ton of small engine stuff. That it seems to be a dirty, messy, smelly type job. I did a lot of that when I was a kid. My grandfather was a small engine mechanic, and so I used to bum around with him a fair bit.
And you were working on something when I came in here that
I was working on a road boring. I'm not a road borer, so I don't know exactly how this system all works, but I was working on the tip of a road boring machine that would penetrate the ground to go underneath of a road or whatever it is that you're looking for. And it's the piece that holds the sensor so that they can steer that road boring.
Right.
So I'm making some new carbide cutting edge on it, I guess. And I do some specialty welding. And so that's one of the things.
So a hobby has turned into a bit of a job too, then, in a sense?
Well, I love my job. I have a great job. And the beautiful part about my job is the things that I get to do, predominantly on a day-by-day basis is also my hobbies. And so I end up dragging a lot of my work back here
I see.
because I like my tools better than I like work's tools. And my shop is my temperature with my music on it, on the stereo and on and on and on.
Right.
Yeah. Totally.
I mean, yeah, I gotta say, I'm a little bit overwhelmed here. I'm looking at like giant magnifying glasses and what is that?
Well, I'm not an old guy yet, but my eyesight and my hearing seem to be leaving me on a rapid pace. So yeah, I've got I think it's about a 6-inch diameter magnifying glass that I built out of anyway. So I seem to walk around with that, and when people look at me, I'll hold it up to my eye and give them the old big eye and shock value. I do a little bit of stuff for shock.
Gotcha.
value. Yeah.
Gotcha. No, and it looks extremely organized. Like you'd think something as packed as this, the clutter and everything. So is there, one section is strictly for one type of tool,
totally
type of work? Yeah.
I believe in a place for everything, and everything has a place.
Right.
And actually, a reasonably intelligent friend of mine once told me, you can either pay me to look for it, or you can pay me to put it away. And it takes the same amount of time.
Right.
So I like labels. Everything that I have is
Yeah.
labeled. This is mechanics tools in this toolbox here beside us. The stuff, the toolboxes are here behind me. This is all machining related stuff, or machining related tooling. I try to keep all the grinding and all the dirtiest stuff toward the back of the shop.
Yeah.
The precision machines don't like that abrasive dust on it and
sure.
hard on things. Kind of this area here, I do a lot of my brainstorming here on this desk that we're talking at, and I got steam engines, and I got some old Morse code machines here, and machines, transmitter receivers, I guess is what they're called.
Right,
but,
right. And every size of Allen wrench that I've ever seen.
Yeah. Some people call me an organized hoarder. Actually, I get that often as the organized hoarder bit,
right?
But I don't know if I actually subscribe to that idea or not. It doesn't always seem that flattering.
No, I guess not. Yeah, the hoarder sense. Especially when you think of that TV show that used to be on there.
When you say hoarder, you think garbage and animal stuff.
I don't think hoarder would have been the term that came to mind, but there's definitely a lot happening here. In a modern sense, what's big now, we talked a little bit about this because I was like, well, we like to promote, my guests with social media and stuff. You're on TikTok.
Yeah.
Do you post a lot of what you do on TikTok?
Most of what I post is either, goofy things on what I'm doing, or some stuff from work. I don't post often.
Right.
And I just kind of started here, it would have been maybe November kind of thing, actually starting to post, but it's kind of something that I enjoy. The kids are always doing it. I got 3 daughters, and they're teenagers now, and so TikTok and these crazy kids and snapping chats and ticking talks and all that other stuff. But I kind of got doing it with them, and then I found some humor in it, something to just kind of lighten the day a little bit. So yeah, I do that.
So you had mentioned there your TikTok handle there is Cole Jackson 1108. And now you can see arbitrarily throughout the shop here 1108 on various things.
Yeah,
it's your number.
It's my number.
What's the significance of that?
Well, it's sort of strange. So it's the time of day that I was born.
Oh, okay. AM or PM?
AM.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess the significance of it, again, I'm going to circle this right back to co-op. Really I'm sorry.
Perfect.
Okay. So I'm at a course in Edmonton, and it's a leadership course. It's a communication course. And I can't remember the exact focus of it, but one of the things that was articulated to me was this theory, seeing red cars. When you bought your first vehicle, you drive it off the lot, you go wherever, one of the first things that you see is a whole bunch of vehicles identical to yours. Well, before that day, you never noticed them. Why? Well, because it became important to you.
Right.
And important things. And so I guess the point of it is the power of positive thinking. When you make something important to you, you find it. And if you're looking for happiness or you're looking for positivity or whatever, if you project it, you're going to find it.
Right.
Well, for me, 1108 is one of my red cars, the red car theory. So when I see it, I try to remind myself, about being positive, working hard, doing all those things that I desire to do. I have a couple of them. One of the strange red cars in my life is baby blue lighters.
Okay.
And because I'm a welder and machinist, I'm always carrying around a lighter with me, it seems. And I only buy these baby blue lighters, or I enjoy these baby blue lighters. They remind me of those sort of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I don't even know. I know roughly I was born at about 3 a.m, but I couldn't say specifically to the minute. But
well, it's strange so like 1108. I'm going to say that probably 5 days a week I catch 1108 the time on my phone, on a clock, somewhere in my world. I'm going to say like 5 times a week, and it's just because I'm looking for it subconsciously or whatever it is. I'm looking for it.
Yeah, it's just I'm trying to think like why don't most people know the time they were born at that particularly. How did you know about it? Like, you were always told from your parents?
Oh, so I come from a family of six children.
Okay.
And like, probably most big families, the walls in the house are just absolutely covered in pictures of kids and this and that. And one of the things that Mom had hung on the wall was these plates that they used to give out in hospitals and I was born in Vermilion, Vermilion, Alberta, and the plate came from the hospital and it showed your baby weight and your birth date. It also included the time, like right down to the minute that you were born. And I just remember seeing it as a kid and it just always resonated with me.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is cool.
I
like that story.
I don't know why. Sometimes I wish I could explain why some of these little things, hit your brain in a certain way.
Sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes the fact that they're there is just cool itself. So, so you've worked on a lot of projects over the years. Do you have a couple that are kind of like at the top of your list as far as favorites that you've done? Or
oh boy,
yeah.
There's a machine over there in the corner, a step toe shaping machine. You can't quite see it from where we're sitting here right now, but did that one over last Christmas. That was a pretty significant project that I enjoyed.
Okay.
You know what? That's a put me on the spot question.
Well, it may be overwhelming. There's so much, like I said, that you've taken on. I guess it's
one of the things I enjoy the most. I guess is when someone brings me something that they've taken to 3 or 4 other people, and those people say, it's too expensive. I don't have time. Not interested. And then they hear about me and they're like, you know what? This guy might be able to figure it out. And I really enjoy that. I love being that guy in like a clutch moment that can pull through.
Yeah. I think one thing I do notice, I guess, when we talk about, say, collectors versus hoarders, I guess, in a sense like that too, I'm not seeing a lot of unfinished projects. Some people just gather, start work on one, something else comes in. So are you of the mind that you take on a project, you finish it before you move on to the next?
Absolutely. I've got a little place over here behind this wall where I'll keep, ongoing projects, if I'm waiting for parts, but I do not like clutter.
Right.
Like as far as on my workbenches or whatever, every day at the end of my day, I'm putting tools away. I don't care what time it is. I don't like 10 projects around. That's when you're going to experience failure. You're going to lose a part. You're going to misplace something. And oftentimes it might be something that's not even yours. You're doing something for someone else.
Right.
That would be a terrible feeling to, have to tell someone, I'm sorry, I can't fix your whatever because I'm a disaster. Yeah. Well, and also a product of working in a small shop.
Right.
You have to have organization.
Yeah. No, absolutely. With some of the restorations you've done, you've mentioned that, some of them are tools you do use. Are some just collectibles?
Absolutely.
or do you sell anything?
My wife would wish that I sold more. I do sell some stuff from time to time. There's a very small group of collectors in Western Canada.
Yeah.
And I'll trade and go back and forth. A couple of the things that I have sold and bought are things like these shapers are beside you there. There's a machine.
Right.
So this one's actually reasonably new, but that's a machine that became obsolete, by World War II.
Okay.
During the war effort, so many of the smelters were begging for scrap. So because those machines were heavy and obsolete, they ended up in the smelters. And, in Western Canada, there's probably less than 40 shapers. Right. And I personally own 5.
Wow.
Yeah. And so through through YouTube. I've gotten to know a couple of YouTube creators that are interested in the same hobbies. I'm not on YouTube, but I've gotten to know some of these
Right.
YouTube creators, and we've done some exchanging of different, antique items or hard to find items and
Right.
whatnot. Yeah.
So is it more just a mission of preserving
Absolutely.
history?
Yeah, absolutely. I love using tools. So many of these tools I'm afraid to break or do additional damage to.
Right.
You talk about machines that are, 120 plus years old. I can do it faster, better on a newer modern machine that I have here in the shop. But there is something that just sort of
Mm-hmm.
soothing about doing it in a really slow fashion, the way they would 100 years ago.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. You can do it faster on a different machine, but
Yeah.
it's soothing.
But I guess it's that understanding. We've seen some incredible things done in the past as far as infrastructure and technology
Absolutely.
and how they figured it out. So it's neat to go back to see where it started at.
Yes. Well, you kind of get a little bit of a sense of the day-to-day life of that working class man,
Right.
on when he was tasked with a job, on how he would ultimately, complete that, and the time it took.
Yeah. Do you have anywhere where you display and show off some of the stuff?
I have upstairs in my office
Okay.
here. My shop here is obviously 2 stories, and I've got an office up there, and I've got a collection of old grain elevator scales and things like that.
wow.
So I work in the agriculture industry. I
Right.
fix grain elevators for a living, I guess, to sum it all up.
Right.
I have a number of antiques up there. The house is, of course, ordained on the walls with old stuff. Here, I got a couple of things, some steam engines, or a little steam engine there,
Right.
and some telegraph machines that I've had since I was a kid.
Would you ever look at collaborating with a museum that it was
Would love to.
more accessible?
Would love to.
Okay.
Yeah, at some point I'm going to have to downsize the shop or some of my collection stuff. I have intentions on I'm actually already building a place.
Okay.
I'm building another place that I have intentions on moving to eventually, and
Right.
and through that I'm going to have to downsize a lot of this stuff.
Gotcha.
But it doesn't seem like there's a lot of, I don't know whether it's not interest, but how do you showcase so many big heavy things, like a shaper that weighs 2,500 pounds,
Yeah.
that's 120 years old? I don't even know what the interest would be.
For me personally, I'm just fascinated by history itself.
Yeah.
I don't honestly have the mind to be able to comprehend how they work or what you would do with them.
Yeah.
And even if I did, these delicate hands don't don't work that way. But I know my wife hates it. We go on holiday somewhere, and you're somewhere, out of mainstream holiday, and I'm looking for the little museum, the little sidebar, I guess, to see what's going on in this place.
Well, and so many small towns have them, and as you're
Yeah.
traveling through, roads are bigger, or roads are better, vehicles are faster.
Yeah.
Again, another co-op quote. There was a senior leader at FCL Co-op that used to say that, and he was talking about the death of small town Western
Right.
Canada, where you
Yeah.
used to stop for gas or to fix a tire, and
That's
every
right.
highway went through the small town, and you had the grain elevator, every
Yeah.
8 to 10 miles, and on and on and on. But every town still has this museum where they're holding on to what that history
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
when, before the Highway 16s and the Highway 2s, kind of killed those small towns. And so they're holding on to that. Like even Manville here has the Telegraph Museum. Actually, and there's 2 museums here in Manville, and shamefully, I've only been to one of them.
That's always the case. You'll travel thousands of miles and go to a museum, but you don't visit your hometown.
Right?
Yeah, no, it was the same with me. But I did make a point. I know Elk Point had a fascinating one there. Old Mr. Andershak had his right on the highway, but he's since passed, and that all those old buildings are gone. And I don't know what, because the collection he had was overwhelming, to say the least. Like out of this world. Like museums would have paid millions for that. And he was just, nope, he hung on to that. So I'm was privileged enough to go through there a couple times. And then that was, something that's always gone through my mind is, you live in St. Paul, you should know a little bit about where you live. So I have gone to that museum a couple times as well, and made sure that I know a little bit about what it's about. So just in case anybody does ask, I can give them kind of the overview at least that way. But yeah,
I think as part of, members of a community, it's something that we could probably all do a little bit better of, is knowing our communities a little bit better. Like you said, like we travel vast, like, in our culture now, we get on an airplane, we'll go somewhere and we'll look at the same thing that you might even have in your same town.
Exactly.
It's very strange.
There's probably about 10 more podcasts we could do in here.
I would think so.
We could pick and choose, and I think maybe you should start investigating yourself about using this TikTok forum for showcasing some of the projects you do, because it really is cool. This is one of the neatest places I visited as far as one-on-one with a guest. So thank you so much for allowing me in here and showing me a little bit around here. I am going to wrap things up, and I know you've listened to a couple of these, so I am not sure how far you've got into, because it's something I didn't do from the get-go. But my one last question, the only time I have a pre-prepared question for my guests, is you're here on a podcast called Now for Someone Completely Interesting. Mm-hmm. If you were to recommend someone for this podcast, who would that be?
Well, it would be really hard for me to not say Justin, the person who recommended me. He is an incredibly interesting person. He is a bundle of energy.
Yeah.
And, I respect him immensely. I've enjoyed my time getting to know him. I haven't known him that well. Yeah. It would be really difficult for me to not recommend him.
Absolutely.
He is a community-minded individual. He's doing some really neat things right now with some candies. I'm going to let, I think you should have him on, let him talk about that.
I know.
and I don't know how far you get into the technology of what it is that he's doing, but there's some really neat technology with what he's doing and how he's doing that.
And it's gone beyond candy now too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Actually, it's funny because the way he does that and the way he prepares these candies is a technology that I've been interested in for a number of years, and I've done a ton of research on. And then all of a sudden he said something to me, and this is in the boardroom.
Right.
And we just blew up. Here we are. We're having our little side conversation. We just can't stop talking. And the rest of the group started looking at us going, "What are you two guys doing?"
Sounds like a regular encounter with Justin Anderson.
Absolutely.
So good recommendation. And as I said earlier on in this podcast, there's no doubt he'll end up here one time, even maybe one of his kids, because they're actually pretty interesting kids too.
I made his daughter something here recently. These bees that you see here up on top of this, and I put it on TikTok, or I put it out there on something, and Justin, he texts me. He says that his daughter really, really wants one of these. And so I spent some time. I ended up actually making quite a number of those for some people, some significant people in my life that I give them to. Right. And shamefully, it took me a couple of months to get the one to Justin for his daughter, but I have now done that.
Bees. Oh, I'll snap a picture of that too, because that is really cool. It's bees made out of all kinds of nuts and bolts, it looks like.
Yeah, I TIG weld them together.
Right on.
Yeah.
Once again, my guest here is Cole Jackson. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your lazy Sunday. I guess it wasn't lazy. I shouldn't say that. You were working in here, but sorry, taking away from your hobby a little bit there. But I really appreciate it. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please make sure you give us a like on our Facebook and Instagram, and make sure you subscribe to us on your favorite podcast provider. You can find us by searching Poolin Radio or Now for Someone Completely Interesting. My guest again, Cole Jackson.